You're learning with 9 to 5 English. Business English for the workplace. Hi, Tim here with another 9 to 5 English lesson. Today, we're going to learn how to make generalizations in English. Don't you hate it when people say things like, Americans are rude? I mean, not all Americans are rude, and people in other countries are rude too. It's simply not helpful to say something is true of a whole group of people. When it's negative like that, it feels wrong. But it can be helpful to describe a group of people as long as we're clear that it's not everyone we're talking about. We call this a generalization. For example, many of my friends work in finance. I'm making a generalization about my friends, and it doesn't have to be people. If I say most of our online sales come from Europe, I'm generalizing about sales. Let's try making a few generalizations like this. Listen to each example, then repeat it for yourself. Ready? Let's get started.
Very little of our business comes through online sales, actually.
Many of the customer concerns are about delivery times.
Most of the people I've talked to like the new website.
On the whole, our employees are pretty happy with their jobs.
Did you hear that expression, on the whole? That's a useful phrase that means in general. You're not talking about everything or everyone, just overall or mainly. Besides phrases like on the whole, you can make this type of generalization with words like most and little. Now, we don't only generalize about how much or how many. We also generalize about what happens. For example, you might say something like, the department budget is normally reviewed by our manager. That word normally tells us that it doesn't always happen, but it usually does. Let's practice some examples of generalizing about things that happen. Remember to repeat the examples after you hear them.
Generally speaking, we see higher sales in the summer months.
Nine times out of 10, customers give us great feedback.
Normally, our new employees go through a training program.
In most cases, we finish our projects ahead of schedule.
So, besides normally, you can use expressions like in most cases and generally speaking, and the other expression we heard is 9 times out of 10. That sounds pretty exact, doesn't it? But it really just means in most cases. We don't really mean exactly 90% of the time. This leads me to talk about how often something happens. That's something we can generalize about as well. And it's very important which words you use. You want to be somewhat accurate. For example, are you late for work usually, sometimes, or rarely? These are frequency words. If you don't use a frequency word, then you are suggesting that something always or never happens, and that might not be true. Let's try some of these expressions for generalizing about how often something happens. Once again, repeat the examples after you hear them.
People don't usually buy something on their first visit.
More often than not, we run out of paper before the end of the month.
It's pretty rare that people complain about our service.
Our staff meetings often last more than 90 minutes.
You probably already know the word often, but what do you think more often than not means? It actually just means more than 50% of the time. We also heard the adjective rare. That's made from the word rarely, meaning not often. Some other frequency words have adjective forms, such as usually, which becomes usual, but others, such as often, don't. Okay, so we've practiced some expressions for generalizing about how many, about how things happen, and how often. But how does this sound in a conversation? Let's listen to a short dialogue between Justine and Andy. They're talking about Andy's customers and products. Let's listen.
So, where are your customers located?
Most of them are in Canada and the US.
And are they happy with your products?
Well, it's pretty rare that we get any complaints.
That's pretty simple, right? When Justine asks about the location of Andy's customers, he says that most of them are in Canada and the US. He's generalizing about how many. Then he says that it's rare that they get complaints about their products. That's generalizing about how often something happens. Makes sense, right? Now it's your turn to practice. We'll repeat the dialogue, but this time we're going to beep out the second speaker's words. You will have to say those parts yourself. Remember to say that most of the customers are in Canada and the US. Then say it's pretty rare to get complaints.
So, where are your customers located? And are they happy with your products?
All right, that's all for this lesson. We've learned some great ways to generalize about how many, about what happens, and about how often things happen. We'll be back soon with some more useful English expressions. Until then, so long and happy learning.